Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about why fearful avoidants may breadcrumb in their romantic relationships to help you sort of gain insight into what's actually going on in the experience. I do want to say, of course, just like with any other attachment style, if you are seeing a lot of breadcrumbing in a relationship, it's very useful to do some inner work so that you can break free from a situation that may not serve you. So I'll keep that part for the end, and I'll give you some steps if you're on the receiving end of breadcrumbing from anybody for how to move through this experience so that you're not staying stuck in something that may be unfair or unjust to you based on like a lack of reciprocation in a relationship. So with that being said, why do fearful avoidants breadcrumb? What I find about fearful avoidance is it's very interesting. It sort of follows like the dismissive avoidant dynamic of like fearful avoidance may breadcrumb because to some degree, they were breadcrumbed in their upbringing. So there's this dynamic of like fearful avoidance generally in their upbringing had more like one-way emotional connection, where when they were there to caretake, to show up, to perform, to achieve, to do whatever the caregivers needed from them in the family dynamic, that's when they got a lot of love and connection. But sometimes like getting love and connection in their moments of being, emotional or sensitive or showing imperfections as a child or making mistakes, sometimes that was really breadcrumbed, right? That when they weren't meeting the caregiver's needs or expectations, they got breadcrumbed. However, that's usually more polarized. So sometimes that's completely the case. Sometimes there's a lot of love in some forms and a lot of disconnect in other forms because of chaos going on in the household. However, that subconscious comfort zone that somebody forms around love and how they're shown to love themselves is essentially what we take into relationships. So if you grow up in a household or you have attachment trauma in some form that causes you to not be able to really give love to yourself in a healthy way, not show up for your needs, not show up for your boundaries, not listen to your feelings and get in touch with them, not support yourself in a variety of different forms. If you grow up in a dynamic where that's what's modeled to you, that becomes the relationship to yourself. And then that becomes what you have available in your emotional bandwidth to give to others. So when we're like replenishing our tank, and a lot of people, I mean, we've got a lot of content on this channel about like how to actually self-love, but so much of what self-love is like get to know yourself, introspect, do personal growth work so that you can assist yourself in moving through problem areas of life, just like you would need a loving parent, for example, if you're going through a problem to sit with you, to get present, to help you strategize and brainstorm solutions to support you, right? So when we do that for ourselves, that's a form of love. And also, listening to our feelings, our needs, our boundaries, knowing what those things are, making space for those things in our lives, not deprioritizing ourselves for the sake of people pleasing all the time. Like all of those are forms of self-love. So basically what we give into those areas is what we then have to give out. And if we're feeling in lack, we're out of relationship to our own feelings. We don't know what our needs are, and thus they're not being met. We don't have good boundaries. Then we're going to feel burnt out all the time. And then we're not going to be able to really pour love into somebody else unless it's specifically from the high of infatuation, which only exists in certain moments and certain stages of dating and relationships. And beyond that, we're not really going to be able to replenish or to give healthy love for a prolonged period of time necessarily. So that's like one section of this. Okay. So it's like the love and the bandwidth being a mirror of what that person has going on in the relationship to themselves. But also sometimes the reason fearful avoidance breadcrumb is because they can get into a dynamic in relationships where the push-pull they give to you is the push-pull that's happening inside of themselves. And that can be because they're in their feelings minus their fears. That can be because they have competing needs. Often fearful avoidants really want love and connection, but they also want freedom and independence. And so that push-pull within them is what you experience on the receiving end. That inconsistency is the result of them like flip-flopping from one part of themselves to another. By the way, if you're fearful avoidant and you want to overcome like a lot of these like challenging dynamics, I was a fearful avoidant for a very long time. So I totally get it. And it's actually exhausting. Like, I think we should make a whole video just on how exhausting it is to be in a relationship or to be, considering getting into a relationship and to not have healed those FA patterns, because you're literally like, you can't rest. Like, relationships are exhausting. It's like, I don't know, there's many features to it, but it's just, sometimes you feel boundaryless and resentful. And sometimes you feel like you're really into a relationship one day and then really scared the next day. And like, there's just not a settling in that takes place, and that can be exhausting. And I'm going to say one other really important thing actually about that in a moment. But if you want to dive into a course to reprogram that, we have our Fearful Avoidant Attachment Style in the 6 stages of relationships. It's called the Advanced Fearful Avoidant course. It's all about reprogramming these different patterns, limiting beliefs, these tendencies that will show up in that way. And you can check it out for free for 7 days using the link below. And it will really help you to like rewire and recondition at the subconscious level, which is like the only place real change happens for a lasting period of time. It really targets the subconscious mind so you can recondition those attachment trauma patterns. So anyways, I'll put the link in the description box below if you want to check that out for 7 days for free. It also gives you access to everything in PDFs, like all of our other courses, that link below. You can check out all the courses. You can just like check out the whole platform in there. I do 4 live webinars with our students every single week. We have bonus speakers come in sometimes and guests, and then we have a daily, if not 2, sometimes even 3 daily social events. So you can bond with other community members and like-minded people who are healing and growing and working on themselves. Anyways, all of that being said, the other thing that often happens besides feelings minus fears and competing needs like freedom versus independence is sometimes fearful avoidance as well. Their own vulnerability scares them. So sometimes like a lot of the conditioned associations for fearful avoidance are that when I'm vulnerable or when I'm feeling too much vulnerability, that makes me weak. That makes me likely to get hurt. These are the subconscious assumptions. The conscious logical mind, when thinking about it, may be like, oh, I know that that's just a fear. But when left on autopilot into its own devices, the subconscious mind will really feed into that and you'll feel that fear. And so sometimes like there will be this experience for a fearful avoidant of wanting to get close, but then like the same thing that you want scares you at the exact same time, like simultaneously. And the wanting to get close represents a need. And the fear that's scaring you represents a conditioned belief system or set of belief systems that you've acquired from attachment trauma. So what I mean by that is you may have a belief that says, somebody will get bored of me and then leave. I will not be enough. I will be abandoned. I will be betrayed. And so you have these beliefs. So you want something, but if you really want this thing, but this is what you believe about it, it's like saying like, oh, you want to eat an ice cream cone, but you believe it's going to poison you, right? Like, it's like you may long for something, but then part of you is going, no, you can't have that because of the long-term outcomes and consequences. And even though that's not necessarily the outcome of every relationship, the belief will make it feel that way, right? And so you want something, but you're like afraid to go there. And this is, as you peel back those belief systems and recondition those belief systems, you set yourself free. And then a lot of people will ask me who are fearful avoidance, like, oh, but if I do that, and I set myself free, and I still have 2 other really important reasons, fearful avoidance, breadcrumb, by the way. But if I set myself free from those beliefs, won't I just get into a relationship and then just get hurt? And the answer is no. Like, getting rid of those belief systems doesn't mean you stop having needs or boundaries, or that when a red flag happens that you don't address it and leave a relationship if it's not serving you, if you see these red flags going on. It doesn't make you like this naive person to not have these fear-based beliefs. And if anything, it makes you see things more clearly and objectively, because you're not coming from this like already fearful place, which gives you room to observe, right? Which gives you room to see red flags, to set a boundary as needed, and so on. 2 other reasons fearful avoidance breadcrumb though, because I'm kind of digressing quite a bit in this video, going on these sort of tangents. So other reason, number 1, is that fearful avoidants often are caught between this, because they're codependent in like their conditioning. and it's very common for fearful avoidance to be, they'll get caught between this dynamic of feeling like I can have you, but it's at the expense of myself. So fearful avoidants often sort of get into this place where they feel like, oh, I can connect with you and be with you. But as soon as I'm with you, then myself becomes obsolete. So as soon as I'm with you, suddenly, I have to totally give myself away. And this goes hand in hand with our next reason, and these things are going to tie together, is that fearful avoidants are not very good at expressing their needs or their boundaries in relationships. So these things sort of go hand in hand. When somebody's codependent and they get into a relationship, they lose the relationship to themselves. When somebody is interdependent and they get into a relationship, they have a benefit that comes into their life with the relationship to themselves. So interdependent is like, I can have my needs, I can have time to myself, I can do the things that are important for me in my career, my friendships, my family relationships, my personal growth, my fitness, my health, in all these different areas. And I can have a relationship, and the relationship doesn't throw everything else out of balance. But in a fearful avoidant who hasn't had the opportunity to do the work, what their experience is that somebody comes in and that makes the relationship to themselves obsolete. They almost feel like they have to become hyper vigilantly focused for this, for the majority of their time on that person. So it's like at the expense, it's like mutually exclusive things at the expense of the relationship to themselves. And so fearful avoidants will fear that as they get closer and closer to somebody, they're like, oh my gosh, the moment I commit to you, I no longer exist. My identity ceases to exist. And they don't consciously think that out, but subconsciously they feel this fear of big commitments, of deep attachment, because what they're actually fearing is the way that they are subconsciously used to relating to somebody else. So it's really important to pay attention to that and recondition those codependent tendencies. That's also in that course that I was mentioning. So those are some really important things to pay attention to. And that breadcrumbing, I mean, of course, there can be other reasons, like the fearful one's actually not that interested in the person in a relationship. It's not a good match. But the vast majority of the time when the fearful one's expressing a lot of interest, and then like they say one thing, but then the breadcrumbs show otherwise, their actions show otherwise. Usually it's because of the inner conflict going on within themselves because of all the different reasons mentioned in this video. So, the last thing I'll say, as I mentioned at the beginning, this sort of bonus piece of content, if you find yourself going along with breadcrumbing, I get it. Like I get like a couple weeks, somebody's, off, somebody's not themselves. They're going through something, they're going through a job change. I get, like, we definitely have ebbs and flows in relationships, and it's important to recognize that. But if somebody's constantly breadcrumbing and you've been in a relationship for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 10 years, I've seen really extended periods of time for this for people. But if somebody's in this relationship for a long period of time and you're seeing this breadcrumbing happening, where it's like, you see all this dynamic of somebody's like saying one thing, not showing up. Somebody only sees you once a month. Like you're just not really getting to connect and feel like you're in a normal relationship. I would advise not to stay in a relationship like that unless your needs are aligned with that kind of relating, right? Like unless you're like, I only want to see somebody once a month as well because of whatever personal reasons. So if you really have unmet needs, you have to ask yourself, well, why do I not either communicate these needs and then set a deadline to see if my partner who was breadcrumbing meets them in the deadline when I'm communicating more clearly? And if they don't, why do I not leave? And if you don't leave, usually it's because you have fears at a subconscious level as your own person, about what it means if you do leave. So usually we'll have stories that exist, right? Like, oh, I'll never find somebody like this, or I'm not worthy of finding somebody better, or I'll be abandoned by everybody else, so I might as well stick this one out, or I don't know how to be alone, and until you actually isolate and recondition, reprogram those fears are the things that are lowering your self-esteem and also trapping you in that relationship. And it's like almost like those fears are like handcuffs that bind you to things that may not serve your highest potential. And so it's really important to be able to isolate those fears and then do the reprogramming work so that if you're in a relationship that's not serving you, not meeting your needs, and you've practiced communicating and expressing them clearly, and you know that this person's still just not responding, then we shouldn't stay in things that are unfulfilling. And so that would become your work to do. So anyways, I hope this makes sense. And let me know in the comments below if you have any other questions about breadcrumbing, the experience of breadcrumbing, different attachment styles and breadcrumbing. And that is it for today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video.